Yep. So my name's Olivia. I'm the events and volunteer manager at Rowing New South Wales. So lovely to meet you all if you don't already know who I am from the other states. So yeah, thank you.
Right, I think we may as well get going. We're up to 52 people. Believe it or not, we have 90 people who have registered for this presentation, which is rather amazing and probably sets a bit of a record for the number of people who have ever been in a meeting of officials. So thank you very much for that interest. I would ask, and I will remind a couple of times, if you could keep your microphones muted just so that we can make it nice and efficient. I'll do my level best to stick to the timeline that we handed out to people. And what I'd ask you to do is, if you have any questions through the presentation, if you can just send them in chat mode to Olivia. She will consolidate them and give them to me either during the meeting or at the end, and we will deal with every single question. There is no need to record or take notes or anything else. You will get a copy of the recording and the presentation at the end. So you don't need to make any notes or anything on the way, but feel free to add some questions if you've got them. So just in case you don't know who I am, there I am. There's a picture of me. I'm easy to recognise. You will, during the presentation, if there are things that you want to know, feel free to make a note or put the questions in, because it may deal with a couple of new points. You'll see some very familiar stuff, and I've tried to add in a few photos from a little regatta I was at a little while ago, which these are both from. As always, I'll acknowledge that the owners, the traditional owners of the land, and their elders past, present and emerging, and as I noted there, even when we're online, we're still on traditional lands. And this is just a reminder that don't make any notes. You don't need to. If you have a question you want to ask me personally, feel free to give me a call or send me an email. If you've got a question you want to share publicly tonight, pass it on to Olivia. So in chat mode, so that we can get that dealt with tonight. So I'll try and get some relevant things as we go through. Probably the only other thing I did want to say is I'm going to deal mostly with level 1 and 2, but there's really not a big difference, not a quantum leap between level 2 and level 3 as we go on. So this is from Linz at the World Rowing Championships, and this is an umpire who's a very experienced world rowing umpire who managed to have his umpire's boat on the course and he didn't cause it, but a collision happened, and you can see the end snapped off the Polish men's pair oar, and that was a real problem for him. This one I'll go through very quickly, but this is the Olympics. Notice the umpire up here next to the camera boat. Camera boat goes in front of him. The Great Britain, I'm going to get out of that, could not get himself into position because the camera boat was immediately to his left and he couldn't do anything about it. So bad things happen to umpires, even in the best of places. This slide I include in everything. I'm going to go through it very quickly, but this accreditation system is a nationwide accreditation system. Level 1 and 2 is handled by the states. Level 3 is handled by Rowing Australia through the Umpires Committee. I'll let you read those in the presentation that's handed out to you later. I'll spend a moment on this, but not too long. As I said, tonight I'm going to deal with mostly level 1 and level 2. Level 3 stuff is not a huge leap above that, but it is managed by Rowing Australia, not by the states. You can see to get into this, you've got to be 16 years old to start with. Now, somebody asked me whether we could change that. There's no real reason why we can't change it. But hang on, I knew that had happened. We haven't had a need to change that at the moment at 16 years. After 1 year, you can be a level 2, and after 3 more years of that, you can be a level 3 umpire. They're there, and I'll let you go through them. But there are a couple of notes in. If you have a look, starting is not supposed to come in until late in level 2 and early level 3. That's really a matter of judgment of people on the day. There's a code of ethics for officials. It's very short and very simple. I'll let you read through it later on in your own time. But every single one of us should have acknowledged that as part of our accreditation. And it has to be acknowledged to be part of the accreditation, and that's all done in Rowing Manager. With that code of ethics goes the expectations for officials, and they're there as well. And tonight we're on the access to self-improvement. We'll go through this one in a minute, but just at the moment we've gone over the 60 mark for people. So if you came in late, we're asking people to send questions on to Olivia to allow her to consolidate them and pass them on either during the presentation to me or at the end when we do the questions and answers. So if we look at the important principles there for umpires, you can see what they are, but I've added the yellow ones at the bottom. It's important you actually know your rules well enough, but understand why the rules are why they're written and what the intent of the rule is, because that can be more important than the actual words in the rule itself. You need to be aware of changes. You need to make sure you treat athletes in a manner that's expected of you or that they expect of you. And you've got to be aware that what we're trying to do is to give them the best opportunity to have the fairest race they can and achieve the best outcome from that race. Here's some examples of where that might have gone wrong. So again, it doesn't matter what the level of the regatta is, things happen, and they can happen at any time with no notice. So the top one is the Rio Olympics, and that caused a bit of a fuss because that crew actually didn't complete the course, but they were allowed to progress. I've been told reliably this one, the 4 through the back of the umpires, the back of the tinny is in Ballarat in Victoria. The oar through the single scull was in the national championships in Penrith, and the lower right is the Masters in Ngambie. So, and that just shows you that conditions can be such that it's very difficult to umpire and it's very difficult to offer fair conditions. But all those things have actually happened, and they've happened within our realm. I've included this one in the introduction in that we use radios all the time and we need to make sure we use them correctly. So I am going to spend a moment or two on this one. Don't ever get on the radio until you listen for a while and make sure that there's a spot for you to make your call. Don't jump in on someone else's call. Don't leap in on a safety call or whatever. When you make the call, you call the person that you wish to talk to, and you state who you are. So they're listening for them, their call sign or name or whatever it is, and then they want to know who's calling them. If they don't answer straight away, wait a moment or two, give them time to either get a space to answer you or to listen to what is required. If they don't answer, make the call again. Make it 2 or 3 times, but after that, realise that there might be something wrong, or you might need to call at a slightly later time or do it another way. Don't butt in on calls. Don't spend too long on the call, and never, never, never call over a rescue call. And the format for a rescue call is that you call rescue, rescue, rescue. That gets everybody's attention because you are letting everybody know. You give the location of the rescue, the crew involved in the rescue, and whether or not you want rescue to attend. So you may just be alerting somebody to an issue, and you may wish to deal with it yourself, or a rescue personnel is not actually required. So make sure you use those, and then no one else should be talking during that rescue until it has been cleared. Now, it may be cleared by the umpire, it could be cleared by the president of the jury, but there should be no radio traffic unless you can make that rescue more efficient. You shouldn't be talking at all until that rescue is cleared. And that slide's repeated later on. But just to emphasise that point, you might have seen this one.
The German Coast Guard. What are you thinking about?
Okay, it's pretty corny, but it demonstrates the point. Just about on our timeline. So what I'm going to do now is just to go through a couple of the points of the level 1 one. So we'll do marshalling. When you get to this slide on the presentation, you can click on any of these slides and go directly to that module, and then you can come back to this slide later on. So we'll just have a quick look at marshalling. So to be fair, this slide isn't actually marshalling. This was practice starts in Tokyo, and crews just turned up, and whoever turned up could come in and do a practice start. But it would have been wonderful to have a marshal there, because the boat soup that we had out on the right would have been a lot easier to handle. But if you're a marshal on the course, it's a pretty important spot. And while a lot of regattas don't have marshals, a marshal can make that regatta a lot more efficient and a lot more simple to operate. You're going to be using a radio. You've got to have a drawer with you. No matter what, you have to have a drawer with you, and that could be electronic. And if you have a drawer, you have to realise that things happen during the regatta that change that drawer. So there could be cancellations of races, there could be consolidations of races, there could be delays for reasons of substitutions or something of the like. Withdrawals might affect the race. Lanes could be changed for conditions, or races could be completely redrawn for things that you may not be aware of at the time. But when they turn up to you as a marshal, you need to know about those things. So that's a case of listening on the radio, and we're looking at methods of getting those notes through in slightly different ways. Just a couple of points for the marshal. The crews are usually marshalled before the start, sometimes in more than one place. When you're talking to the crews, it's important that you call the crew by their name first. But what I would suggest you always do is announce the race. And I've put an order there. So you'd say race 12, the category of the race, under 17 women's single scull, then division 2. And then you call the crews up. When you call the crews, so you call Barwon and then tell them they're in lane 2. After that, you're marshalling for a purpose. You're either marshalling to send them up in a group, or you're marshalling to send them up in an order, or you're marshalling to make sure that you've got all the crews in each race. Some people get a bit fussed about uniform at this point. You don't need to worry about uniform so much, but if there's an issue that's obvious to you, you might want to let them know. If there's a problem with bow numbers or missing crews or anything else, my suggestion is you write it down, you make notes, and you make sure you pass that on in the way that's expected of you to the people who need to know. So missing crews need to be known by the starter in particular, but they might also be something later on that the president of the jury might want to know. So make sure you keep those records. And that's just a little summary slide. You can have a look at that later on, but there's just a couple of notes in there that you need to send crews up so there's plenty of time for them to get to the start. You need to make sure that you don't hold them up if somebody's missing. And you need to know that you're aware of the races and the crews, and particularly the time of their start. And that can be a real point when you come to consolidations, where 3 heats have been consolidated to 2 or 2 have been consolidated to 1, because they may well be in different lanes in a race at a slightly different time. So it's important that you do that and you pass it on to them as well. I've just put down there, it's a job where you need to keep records, and you need to make sure your records are accurate, because you should expect that people are going to call you and ask you for answers on why a crew's not there and so on. And there's just a repetition of using the radio, because a marshal is a person who absolutely has to be able to use the radio correctly and has to be aware of what's going on around them. So again, if you're looking at the presentation, these slides will actually bring you to a point where you can get back to the title slide. So we can go back to the title slide, and we're looking at aligning. So we just go to here. I like this slide. You can see the crew on the other side is pointing the wrong way, but to be fair to them, they're actually on the way to start for another race. They just happen to look like they're lined up. So again, this is just an introduction slide that's on every module in case that's the first module you go to. So when we align a race, we usually try and align the race in those, and this is when you have an aligner as a dedicated job. We're trying to get that alignment done within the 2 minutes, or after the start is called 2 minutes. And we use a process to get it done. If we have a line, there's an indicator, which is a flag or a light, to say that there is a line. If there isn't a line, the light goes off or the flag goes down until the line's restored, and then it goes back up. And that's the same all the way to international regattas. The line is on the front of the bow ball, pretty obvious. And if there's a false start, it's really important. The aligner is the only person who can judge a false start, and it's important that that signal is put through very quickly. So it may well be a horn or a call It could be flashing lights, but whatever the signal is, it needs to be done very quickly and accurately. And you as the aligner need to have a good understanding of who false started and perhaps why they appeared to false start. And we'll deal with that in a minute. Once you've done that, you then make a call to the starter, just to say, I'm trying to, no, I'll have to do this another way. You need to make a call to the starter to let them know who false started. So starter, this is a liner, lane 4 false start. You can give the crew name of that too. You don't need to call if there's been a good start, and an indicator on the pontoon is actually required under the rules, but isn't always the practice at state regattas. And the reason for that is just to make sure the crew is actually informed that they've got a penalty for a false start. And we'll talk about that now. A couple of questions that are worth answering for this. Now, what is a false start? A false start is when a crew's gone across the line between attention and go. So before attention, it's the aligner's job to get them on the line. After attention, they're ready for a start. If they go across the line before go, then that's a false start. The only time that might change ever so slightly is if they manage to get across the line and back on the line before the word go is said. And you may occasionally see that. And as the aligner, you can judge that that was a good start, because remember, you're the only one who can judge it. Penalty for a false start is a mandatory yellow card. I'm going to stop here for 1 second and say that this is a presentation to Rowing New South Wales. If there are some very slight differences in other states, I'll try and mention them, but it really is a presentation for New South Wales, and I'm going to deal with mostly New South Wales centred stuff, but there's very little variation across the states, but you might be aware of some. If a yellow card is given for a race, that yellow card is finished, dealt with at the end of that race, unless that race is re-rowed, and then it will be at the end of the re-row. So it disappears at the end of that race if it was for a false start. If you manage to get a second yellow card, that is an exclusion or a red card, and that crew has to leave the course before the race has started. If you leave them on the course, there's every chance that they'll join the race and you'll have absolutely no control over that once they go. A red card is applied on a second yellow card. So I will make the point that if you give a yellow card for a very minor infringement before a race, and that crew is unlucky enough to have a false start as well, they will automatically be excluded from the race. So my advice is always don't give out a yellow card unless it's truly deserved. If it's a minor infringement, then think about a reprimand rather than a yellow card, because a yellow card and even an accidental false start will result in a red card and exclusion. So I just want to make this point fairly quickly, but if lane 1 and 8 false start, you've got to think about what might have happened and who's penalised. So if we just look at the answer to that, it's very likely that both of those crews false started, because lane 8 was probably not influenced by lane 1 on the other side of the course. Whereas if lane 2 and 3 false start, lane 2 might have jumped early and lane 3 might have gone with them just as a reaction to seeing a crew move. So again, as the aligner, it's your judgment, your call, and you make that call. But be aware if 2 and 3 go, it may have been 2 that went and 3 got dragged out, whereas 1 and 8, it's pretty unlikely that they both went as a result of the other. If the starter's going through the roll call and you lose, the line is lost and you put the flag down and they continue the roll call, that's okay. It's only right at the end of the roll call that it truly matters. But if you're aware, like if they get to the end of the roll call and they look like they're going to start, you should try and make them aware by some subtle means, perhaps a quick call on the radio or something like that. But you can't call it a false start until they've said the word go. Can you align during the roll call? Of course you can, provided it's silent. You don't want a megaphone out talking to boat holders while the starter's trying to start a race through the roll call. So again, I'll let you read this in detail, but we usually say forward or back rather than out and in. Sometimes we have to say that forwards towards the finish. There can be more than one false start. You need to talk to the starter. If you're in Sydney, you will be on a camera. There will be a camera, and it's even possible there'll be a video camera on you while you're doing it. Almost every course you're at, you'll have some sort of microphone or radio, and it's very important that you consider what you sound like to other people that are listening. At Cirque in Penrith, you can well be broadcast into the grandstand or over the PA. So you need to be very careful about your manner and what you say on the microphone, which is pretty standard for almost anywhere you are. If you're speaking into a microphone, you're speaking publicly, and your voice could be both broadcast and recorded. And the last bit I'll put there is just remember that the race is judged at the finish, but the assumption is that there was a good line at the start and everybody had a fair start and rode the same distance. You can make your own judgment on this, but there's 3 starts there, all in Penrith, all at Cirque. There's 3 starts there. Only one of them is what I'd consider to be a fair start, and you can have a look and decide for yourself. The bottom right-hand corner is the schoolgirl head of the river. So the pinnacle race for the schoolgirls for the season, and that was a start. So I wouldn't be so proud if my name was printed over that photo. So just remember that, you know, you're there to make it fair, and you're the only person who can get them on the line and get it done. So try and do your best. This is a bit of my work. So I managed to align the umpire's boat there as well. It was a fluke, actually. The umpire's boat crept up on the line and actually was right on the line as they went. But if you think about that, if that umpire's boat had come up much further, they would have started to obstruct the first 3 crews there. So as an umpire, you don't go moving about on the line, particularly not while a start's in progress, and even more so if you're on the aligner side. Nice little photo of the start system dropping away into the water. We'll go back to our last one, judging. So just to describe this slide to you, the person with a screen in front of them is the judge responsible. The person next to him with the laptop is the president of the jury. The person to his right is actually on the board of the jury, and they don't have a role to play there at all. And the person in the far right with the grey shirt on is actually one of the broadcast people, so he's just watching. The person in the pinky peachy coloured shirt on the left-hand side is the person on the line judging the race, and the person behind her is the other world rowing umpire who's actually judging the positions. So here the role of the person sitting high on the seat is to judge the finish. The person with the screen in front is to ensure that the placings are accurate as they've been displayed on the results. So as a judge, the order, the margin, and the race being cleared or complete, and the results being official that's your job. That's a summary of your job. If there's a problem, you need to talk with the president of the jury or anybody who makes decisions to make sure they know it, and you need to be aware of boats in the finish area, and you need to have your facts so that you can assist anybody if there's any infringements or objections at the end of a race. We'll talk about one of the wonderful objections at the Olympics at the end, so just keep that in mind. Just a couple of things. If you are the judge, you need to be in control of the judging area. You need to know what's going on around you. You need to know what people are doing and how they're doing it. Make sure you wait until the umpire clears the race. So don't go sticking white lights or flags up until the umpire indicates they're going to clear the race, because it's not your job to make that judgment, it's the umpire's job. Once that's done, you can acknowledge it and say, yeah, I'm aware, and we can now publish the results. Always look at the close finishes with the best technology that you've got. Don't go, oh, I've got it, I know what I'm doing. If you've got a camera there or you've got a video or whatever, and it was close, go and have a look at it, make sure. Because occasionally, if you're not sitting right on the line, it's surprising how small a distance away you have to be for the result to become confusing. So if you've got a finish camera, go and use it if they're close together. If they're half a boat length apart, you don't need it. We've got some extra judges at Cirque. We get the shag sitting on the buoys to help us out every now and then. Just a couple of things here. And again, you need to look at some of these things. It sounds like it's really simple, but some of them are very good hints. The top one, for instance, if you've got boats that are coming to the line close together. Don't try and track those boats to the line. Look at them, and as they get close to the line, focus on the line, and then get the boats as they cross the line. Don't try and track the boats down to the line. I could give you the science behind this some other time, but if you try that, it's very hard to get it right every single time. But if you focus on the line, that's far and away the best way to get the correct judgment on the line. Once a white flag's been shown by an umpire, you can publish the results. If a protest or something comes in later on, it'll be dealt with by the board of the jury or the president of the jury or the jury itself. But as a judge, if there's a white flag up, you can clear the race. If you can't see the difference between two boats, it's a dead heat. So don't try and find the difference. If you can't see it, it's a dead heat. If you're looking with your eyeball and you didn't see any difference, then it's a dead heat. If you've got a finish camera and you can't see it, or that it's not clear enough to see it, then it's a dead heat. If there's a red flag, it means you can't publish the results. And that's really all it means, is that more time is required to resolve that issue, and the results can't be published. And there's just an indication there of a dead heat. And the bottom of Mike's slide is covered up. I'm pretty sure that dead heat is for second place. I just put this photo in because I could, but it looks horribly like the boat holder's got hold of the German sculler's nose, but she's not. She's in the next lane. So that was all of those, and believe it or not, we are actually staying on time. Olivia, are there any questions that people might want to deal with now?
We've had no questions yet.
Fantastic. That means everybody's gone to sleep. Sorry about that. So we'll move on to the next one. So I've put on my timeline umpiring and control commission. So I deliberately left only two in this. So umpiring is a nice, easy job. Just a bit of trivia for you. That's actually called the Tokyo Gateway Bridge, but the locals call it the Godzilla Bridge. Because if you look at it, it looks a bit like two Godzillas about to fight each other, and the Japanese are ever so slightly obsessed with Godzilla. Title slide, same as the others. This one will take a little bit longer than the others, and there's a few things that I do want to stress, because umpiring is one of those jobs that we spend a fair bit more time on. So as the umpire, you're making sure that you've got everything you need and the course has everything it needs. So not only is it about you and the boat, it's about the course itself. And you as an umpire are one of the people who's travelling on the course, and you're probably the only people who's travelling up the course before the start of the regatta. So your job is to make sure things are going as they should. You need to be aware of the competence of your driver. If you've got a brand new driver who's a dad of a year 8 girl and he's never been in the boat before, you've got a little bit more assistance to do. If you've got somebody who's been driving for the Nationals for the last 5 or 6 years, you can make the assumption that they're experienced, but you can't make the assumption they know exactly what to do. And in the end, if something goes wrong in the boat, it is actually your fault. So you need to give nice, clear instructions on what you want, where you want to be, and how you want to get there. Your primary responsibility is about safety and fairness. It's the safety of everybody, including you and your driver and everything else, but it's about the fairness of racing as well. And that means that you cannot wash a race unless it's the only possible way to do your job. So at the start, it's important that you're aware of what's going on at the start and you know how things are going to go. Progressions are there in that if you've got a heat and crews are progressing, you need to be aware of any issues in the race and how that might affect the progression. So if you've got 3 people out of 6 going through and there's a problem with the last 2 crews, it's not really going to have an effect on the next round of racing. So you can be aware of their safety and be conscious of that, but you don't have to worry so much about the outcome of their positions on the race. Whereas if you got first and second having a problem and there's 3 progressing, that might become a major headache for you later on. So you need to be aware of that. That one I showed you from Tokyo, that was for a medals place. And I'll talk to you about protest later on, but that was a medals position. So it was a very, very important thing. And if you're going to use a flag, use it properly. And I can't do this because I can't demonstrate it, but you do not stick a flag up in the air, make a call and hang it out the side and wait 5 minutes for the crew to change. You put the flag up, you put the flag out to one side to show the direction you want the crew to move in. and then you put the flag away. And the flag should be behind you, not flapping around in the air. And if they don't respond to that, and you put the flag up again, you call them, you put the flag out, and you put it away again. And you might do that 2 or 3 times, but you don't leave the flag out flapping, and you don't call one crew with a flag out to the right and then call the next crew with a flag out to the left. It's not a swishing action at all. It's a deliberate action for each crew. Having said that, you might be just talking to a crew, in which case you just put the flag up, call the crew, talk to them, and then put the flag away. If you're not asking them to change direction, there's no indication of direction. We can talk about that a little later. I've already said never wash a crew unless it's the only way you can get your job done. You shouldn't steer a crew unless you need to do it for safety. You shouldn't make the timer's job difficult by being in front of a crew on a line while they're trying to do a time. And you should never be on the finish line if there's a race, unless there was a major issue and a rescue required, and that was the only way you could do it. I've got there watch every race because it might become your race. And what that means is if you're zonal umpiring or you're following or whatever, if there's an issue on the course and somebody else moves, you might have to take that race. So don't ever make the assumption that you've just got every 4th race or every 3rd race or every 6th race, because the next race might be yours. So you should be looking at your program, keeping up with it, and looking at the crews and knowing who they are. And that's one of the little goals I set myself, is knowing all of the colours and all of the crew, the club names, so that I can do it. And if you go to New Zealand or you go somewhere else, that's a good little project to set yourself and a good skill to gain. If you're too close to the crews or you're directly behind them, you actually put yourself and them in danger. You shouldn't put yourself between crews. They should be able to see everybody in the race and be aware of their position relative to the other crews as well. If you're calling a crew, you should be behind the crew. And as I said, that was the one in the Olympics where the guy could not get behind the crew. And so the complaint from the Great Britain crew, believe it or not, was that the umpire wasn't instructing them, but he was. They just weren't aware of it, and he couldn't get himself into a position to be directly behind them. And where you are, as I said, depends on what the race is and what the progression is. If you're in a para race and you've got somebody way behind, you might be sitting back so you don't wash anybody. If you've got the King's Cup and you're right up the front, you might be looking at just the medals positions +1. And using the flag properly is an absolutely vital skill. I'll put this in because I like the picture, but I actually said it might be the new form of zonal umpiring. We just sit on the side with a submarine, and we're about to get some new ones. So we might get the old ones for umpiring, although I doubt it. This is just there for information. You can have a look at it later on, but this is what we used at the Nationals to just say that if a race is 5 minutes or less, it'll be zonal. If it's more than that, it'll be following. If they're underage, they'll be followed. If they're the higher categories, then they'll be zonal. So you can have a look at that later on. It's just a formula we developed and it worked fairly well. I'm going to spend a little bit of time on these. You notice it says 6 umpires here, and because these are the slides used for level 3, and they reflect almost perfectly what happens at World Rowing, although World Rowing try and complicate it a little bit at times, but it's how it is. So at the moment, the practice in New South Wales, and certainly in most of the other states I've seen, is if we're zonal umpiring, we're just moving very slowly out onto the course, watching the crews progress in our zone, and then moving back. So our movement on the course is very slow from the side of the course after the last crew passes you, not the last crew, but the crew on your side, if you like. So you can come out onto the course, you'd sit in the middle, you'd point towards the finish, watch the crews into the next zone, and then if there's no issues at all, you'd move back. If there was a very minor issue, you might inform the umpire in the next position that 2 crews are close together and you might want to keep an eye on them. If there's a major issue, we'll talk about that in the next slide. But your job simply is to just move out, have a look, observe, and when your zone is complete, so this is umpire 2, umpire 2's job is finished when umpire 3 takes up their position or their zone. So when umpire 3 starts to move out, umpire 2 can move back. So you don't move back until the next umpire is showing you that they're taking their spot on the course. The gaps and positions down the course are decided by the president of the jury, and they'll be broadcast by whatever method. So it might be printed, it might be on the draw. Umpire 6 in every race comes out, goes to the end of the race and indicates whether or not the race is clear. Umpire 6 can only know that the race is clear because none of the other umpires have followed the race. So if umpire 6 is the last one, there's been no radio calls and no indication of issues, and there's none in the umpire 6 zone, the race will be clear. So umpire 6 will come out, clear the race, and then slowly return to their position to clear the next race. So that was what we call a normal race. If there's a problem in the race, so in this case, umpire 4 spots a problem, umpire 4 moves out onto the course and follows that race to the end. So we don't come out, do your zone and go, right, it's all yours now, you can have it. They will go all the way to the end of the race and they will indicate whether or not the race is clear because they're the only one that has that perspective and has that information and knowledge. Umpire 5 and 6 in this case, or 3 and 4 or 2 and 3, will move up the course to take the other positions. And this umpire, once the race is clear, will move across to the umpire 6 position. And you notice we're talking about those numbers. It's got nothing to do with the number on the boat in this case. It's the position of the umpire on the course. So umpire 6 might have a 1 on their boat. It's not by the number on their boat. So, and now as an umpire, so this is zonal or following. Now, if you're in the finish area, it's your job to make sure that things are safe. And that means you've scanned the rowers at the finish of the race and make sure that everybody's okay and there's no issues. You need to be aware of what's going on and what the places were across the line. If the race is clear, you would hold the flag up above your head towards the crews. And you can't see me, but I'm holding 2 hands in the air because you'd hold the flag, the bottom of the flag, like the umpire's doing there, to indicate that you're about to clear the race. Once that is accepted by the crews or not objected to, you would then turn the flag and show the judges that the race is clear. If the race is not clear, then a red flag is raised to show that there's a further process going to take place and that time needs to be allocated to have that happen. That might be done in 30 seconds. It might take a day if it's really bad, but the results won't be published until that race is cleared. And my advice is if you put a red flag up, don't put a white flag up 30 seconds later. You know, if the results are decided, let them be published and let people know that way rather than confuse people by putting white flags up, red flags up for the same race. I'm going to go through these very quickly because we don't experience time trials very often. But essentially, most time trials now use 2 lanes. Some might use 1. And they're usually done now because of conditions. If you're lucky enough to go to a world rowing race, they put them in for practice, just so that umpires and coaches and crews are aware of them. But they're usually held over 2 lanes. There were time trials at the Olympics, believe it or not, for the Spears races. And they're usually done for a range of reasons, but often just to do with conditions. They don't have to be over 2,000 metres. So sometimes in Sydney, they're held over 1,900 metres, where the crews start at 100 metres and the time trial's held over the next 1,900 metres. And you can see the umpires here are staggered across and down the course. And you can see that they're also not on the timing lines. So they're slightly askew from the timing lines. And they're just looking at the crews passing. They're not trying to follow races. They're not trying to make judgments or anything else. If there's an issue, they just pass it on. They don't never hop out onto the race and follow it because there's going to be another crew coming down 30 seconds later. Now, I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this slide and hopefully I can keep with my timeline. I should be able to. Dealing with an objection. So what I've said here is don't make an objection happen. If there isn't one, you don't have to deal with it. So don't go over to crews and ask them if they want to object. If there's an objection, deal with it. If there isn't, then you don't have to deal with it. So if there is an objection, the process is pretty simple, but it goes objection first, then protest. And if somebody wants to talk about the protest, then it goes to appeal. So it's objection, protest, appeal. Most people talk about protest, but protest is actually step 2. I'm going to let you spend a bit more time on that slide, but the process is fairly simple. If they object, you have to decide whether or not there's been a disadvantage. If there's no disadvantage, then you can clear the race and it's a regular race. If there is a disadvantage, then you need to make the judgment of whether or not it affected their ranking in the finish. And if it did affect their ranking, then you might have to look at excluding a crew from the results who caused that issue. And then you have to ask yourself the question, if I take them out, will that restore the chances of the crew to get the position that they were in? If it won't, then you're going to have to look at a rerow. If it will, then you can confirm the result and let the result be published. And realise that there are protests and there are appeals that can be gone through. So you might make a decision and the decision might be challenged, but you've got to have it clear in your head and you've got to make that decision. I'm happy to take questions on that or explain it a bit more if people need it, but some of us get it. Some of us have a little bit of trouble thinking it through. But if you follow that process of, first of all, is there an objection? Yes, there is. It didn't affect the race. Bang, done. If it did affect the race, did it affect their ranking? Because some crews say, look, I was coming third and they ran into me and I came third. So they came third. It didn't change their ranking. You can clear the race. If it did affect their ranking, then you might exclude a crew and confirm the race. If you can't do that because the crew who was coming third got crashed into and they ended up coming sixth, then you'll have to re-row crews. And when you get to re-rowing, the decision becomes one step more difficult in that you only re-row the crews that are affected. So as I said, if it was third going to sixth, you would go from third down, maybe not all crews, but you go from third down, you wouldn't re-row first and second again because their results were clear. So have a look at that, put some scenarios on paper and have a look at it in your own time. But it's a pretty simple process if you follow those steps. It can become clouded and complicated at times. Just for umpires, again, I'll let you read through those, but watch every single race. Don't look at other races and go, well, that's not mine, it doesn't matter. Be aware of the traffic around the race. You might need to get rid of a crew that's going to influence a race before they get a chance to. So if you see a crew on the course, you can get them off the course before the race comes down. Show flags clearly and take your time to work through objections. If you need time, put a red flag up. So I'm not going to clear the race. I need some information from the judges or the president of the jury, not the president of the jury, the judges, or perhaps another observer. And the reason that ugly hand is there is that was the only place I had to write notes. So I was out on open water, bouncing around. I couldn't pick my program up. So I made the notes about a collision on my hand and I took a photo so that I was able to wash my hand and keep the notes. But they're my notes on the collision, and I can explain that to you later on if I have to. So if you're wondering why it was windy in Tokyo, they had these big fans on the side of the course, and I think they were the cause of most of the wind because every day it was windy, they were blowing. So we'll have to do this one really quickly to stick to our time, but we can do it. If I can find it, Control Commission. So if you look at this and wonder why I've got this slide there, it's just to show you that sometimes the job of Control Commission can be a bit odd. All of the coloured tapes are there to allow you to cover up things that can't be shown on particular crews. So this was at the Olympics, and here is a good example of it. So here's a boat that's got some illegal or unacceptable identifications on the boat, and they needed to be covered. So the best thing to cover them with was a bit of black tape, and they got covered up. Now, you can make your judgment on whether or not that's important, but it is important in these regattas when people are paying sponsorships and so on. So that's one of the roles of Control Commission at some regattas. So there's your title slide. This one will take a little bit longer, but I'll be able to make it, I think. So before the race, we're looking at boats, equipments on the boats like bow balls, shoes, and so on. We're looking at oars and bow numbers. The thing about Control Commission is we hardly ever run them at state regattas, so people hardly ever know about them. They know about shoes and bow balls and so on, but they don't know about it at the higher levels, and sometimes it's our job to educate them, but to do that, you've got to educate yourself first and be aware of what they are. We know this bit with athletes where we look at the weights of rowers and coxswains, And in para races, we look to make sure that their safety of their strapping and equipment is up to par. While the regatta's on, we're looking at safety all the time, and that includes anybody who's on control commission, because they're looking at traffic in and about pontoons. During racing, you're looking at traffic in warm-up and cool-down areas. And after racing, we're looking at weights of boats, if that's available at the regatta, and we're looking at weights of coxswains, but only at the weights that they've carried to bring them up to minimum weight. We don't check weights of athletes after races, we only check them before. And I've just put there, be aware that rules for coxswains have changed. We'll talk about those in a minute. The changes to heel restraints, and I know that's become a topic fairly recently in a few places. Essentially, if the shoe comes out of the boat with a rower, it doesn't have to be restrained. If the shoe stays in the boat, it has to be restrained. And the last point I'll put there is some coaches know nothing about control commission, and sometimes it's your job to educate them on how it works. And that can sometimes be a very difficult point. And these are just to illustrate, people say, oh, why do you have a control commission? The first three of these were at a single regatta, and it was a national regatta in Perth. And every single one of those is a major safety issue and needed to be dealt with. And you can see the one on the top right's got a bow number on it. So they were actually heading out to a race. And the last little slide here is a bit of a personal experience of mine. Here's the Australian Junior Women's 8 coming in after their race, having finished fourth. And I got the job of signing a piece of paper to say that they were relegated to last place because their boat was underweight. So they went all the way to Rio, got all the way to the final, rode the race, came fourth in the world, and ended up showing as last because their boat was underweight. So sometimes it's a tough job. But probably the only good thing about that was that they came fourth and not third, so it didn't actually affect the medal. I'm not going to spend too long on these, but boats have minimum weights that they have to meet, and boats can be, they can carry weight to make up that minimum weight. PR 1, 2 and 3 are the para boats, and you can see there are slight considerations for their boats. But essentially, if an item's fastened to the boat, it's part of the boat weight. For the poor old paras, if you've got an artificial limb or a part that you require, that's not included in the weight of the boat. So you can't leave your leg in the boat and say, oh, I can have a boat that weighs 3 kilos less. And just, again, you can have a look at these in your own time. But if you're a level 3 umpire or you're weighing boats, you need to be aware that when you weigh a boat, you need to, and it goes underweight, you need to make sure you've got a record of it. You test the scales, and then you take a record of the second weighing, and you pass that on. So it's really there for level 3. But if you had the chance to see it, it's worth knowing. And some of our level 2 umpires go to the nationals as technical officials too. Now on to athletes. So lightweight athletes get weighed. These are their normal weights. So for men, no individual rower can weigh more than 72.5 kilos. And the crew average, if it's being applied, is 70 kilos. And for women, it's 59 and 57. They weigh in between 2 hours and 1 hour before their race. And the weight can be carried for the day for them. And we'll see later on for the coxswains. In New South Wales, we allow a plus on average weights early in the season. And there's good reason for that. But it changes because we don't use the average weight for the crew then. We use an average weight plus a percentage, 3%, 6% for the individuals. So the other people we weigh are coxswains. And luckily now, I think all states are consistent with this, that it's 55 kilos for all coxswains across the board. If your state uses a variation on that, you need to be aware of that. In New South Wales, as nationally, it's 2 hours to 1 hour before the first race of the day, and they can carry their weight for that day. So again, there might be a variation on that in your state, but that's the way it is in New South Wales and the way it is nationally as well. And internationally, except they weigh in for each race internationally. So when a coxswain comes in, make sure you check the time, get them to hop on with their weights, hop off and leave their weights behind, and record the time and the weight that they carry, not the weight of the coxswain, just the weight they carry. and then ask them if they have any other races or if you'll see another system, it checks that for you. But what we say in New South Wales is we do not want to record, or we're not required to record the weight of the coxswain. If the coxswain weighs more than 55 kilos, we put a tick there. If they were less than 55 kilos, we record how much they carry. And in New South Wales, we limit the amount they carry to 15 kilos. So they can't carry more than 15. And if you're good at maths, that means you have to weigh 40 kilos to be a coxswain. Lightweight's roughly the same, but there's a few other considerations. So 2 hours to 1 hour before their race. If there's a crew, they're weighed in as the crew. We record the weight of the athlete this time because it's really important they're not carrying weight because they've got to make a weight. They can't go over the weight. And we record the time because that's really important with this 2 hours to 1 hour. We check the average weight of the crew before they leave the weigh-in area. And we look to see if they need to carry their weight for any other races. If there are issues, if somebody hasn't weighed in or they haven't made their weight or a crew hasn't made their average, make sure the president of the jury knows because it will affect races and it will affect crews. Now, down here, if you click down the bottom here, you'll go back to the title screen. I just want to show you the next couple of slides, but I don't want to go through them. So we now have an electronic weigh-in module, and that's the computer there that we started with. No, it's not. And it now records all of this electronically, and we're starting to use this in New South Wales, and we used it at the last national championship. So I'm going to go really quickly through these, and you can flick through them and ask questions later on. There's a coxswain's module and a lightweights module. You can search for races and deal with the race. If the window of the race you're looking at is green, you can weigh them in. If it's red, then they're too late, and you should not ever enter any data while that screen is red. If it's black and white like this, it's not time yet. If it's green, it is time. If it's red, it's not, it's too late. So just to go very quickly through this, you'll see there's demonstrations of each one. This one's a double scull. So both crews have weighed in, both crew members have weighed in, and they can be passed for their average weight because the average weight's calculated once they've all weighed in. Again, we're looking at lightweights, and you'll see little demonstrations of each thing there. But you can see here there's a red window which shows that they're too late for weigh-in, and they should not be weighed in, and their weight should not be recorded. If it's green, weigh them in. If it's red, they're too late. You can change their weights as well. I'm going to go through this really quickly. This is still in lightweights, so we'll go through that extra quick. So when we get to coxswains, you can see this coxswain's got one red window and one green window, which means that they're too late for this race, but they're okay for this race. Coxswains might be in 4 races for the day and they'll all show up. In New South Wales, we don't weigh our junior crews, so if they don't have to be weighed, it will show not required. If the crew's been scratched, it'll show scratched, but they'll have the crew crossed out, and you can see that they're not required or they're not coming. And just the reason I wanted to go through this was now if you use this module and the starter has this screen, they get this information. So these crews have all picked up their bow numbers. So it's a lightweight race. So these people have weighed in. This person with the red cross has not weighed into that race. So they should not race. And the DNSs did not start. So after the race, after the start, the DNS can be entered, and that will be entered automatically into the results. And in this race, all the bow numbers are being collected. If a bow number is not collected, it shows up like this. So this is a coxed race, and you can see that the crew hasn't picked up their bow number and the coxswain hasn't weighed in. So you could take a pretty good guess that they're not coming, even if there's no withdrawal. Just realised I don't have to rush nearly as much as I thought, but I'll keep going. So this one will just show you what the control buttons do on each one. And we've deliberately set the colours on the buttons. Blue means that you have to do something. Purple is a way of controlling the screen, and red means that you shouldn't do anything at all. So red means that you shouldn't be entering data at all. These two here, reset and reload. Reset resets your search. Actually, I'll go through because it shows resets the search, and reload reloads the whole page. The blue ones where you're required to make some action is once you've recorded a carried weight, you can save it. If the person weighs over 55 kilos, you can just hit minimum weight and they'll go straight through. And again, it will all show up on the starter screen. And these are just some points of what you don't do. If the lightweight comes in and they're overweight, don't record them. If a coxswain comes in and they're underweight, don't record them until they come back and they are. Because what will happen is if you enter data, that will show up on the starter screen and the starter will make the assumption that they've weighed in. So if they're out of the parameters, do not put it in. Make a note on paper if you want to, but don't put it in. So again, I'll let you go through those. But we need to log in. You log in with the official's name. So if you're on the jury, you can log in with your surname. Yeah, we did have to get the starter, so we're still getting there. Any questions, Olivia?
Yeah, we have a couple. I've sent them through to you.
Oh, sorry. There you go. Might have a quick look. Oh, I'm going to have to get, oh no, I can do it. Sorry, Olivia, I didn't realise that'd come through. So just, again, that's, well, I think that looks like Australia there, doesn't it? At the start. Yep. So somebody has said, you know, sometimes when people are using radios, they call by names. That certainly isn't a practice that I'd encourage. Occasionally people will use a name if the person hasn't answered their role. But yeah, use the role because it makes it a lot easier. And Judith also said if if you've got races that are spread well apart and you want to deal with crews that are up the front, can you get in front of crews that are trailing the race? The answer to that is yes, provided you're not going to cause a safety issue. Yes, and you don't block the vision between the crews. But again, you'd make a judgment. If there's no point being there and you're not going to achieve anything, and you might wash a crew down the back, then don't rush up there. But be aware that you might need to be there, provided you're not blocking vision. If there's a real issue and you're in the final of, say, a state championships or ahead of the river, and there is an issue up front and there is a crew trailing well behind, you may have to move into their lane. So the idea is you'd move up, you'd cross into their lane, and then you'd drive forward in their lane. The idea of that is, and you'd inform them that you're going to do that, they would get one wash, you move into their lane, and then they sit in your wake where the water is safe and maybe even a little bit flatter for them. But that makes it safe for what you've done and gets you up to where you need to be. If it's a rescue and an urgent rescue required, then you have to be there. And that's one of those things where that's the only option you've got. And the next question was, if you're at a lower age level or a school race, and you're asked for assistance by the crew, how much do you do? And particularly they're talking about repairs and time taken. My answer to that would be that you help as much as you can. If you've got tools there and you can get stuff done, you're a marshal and they've got a loose bolt, then give them a spanner and let them get it done. If you're an umpire and there's 5 minutes before a race and they're going to tighten a bolt up or make sure something's adjusted properly, then do it. If they're going to delay the entire regatta, then make that the president of the jury's decision as to whether or not they'll delay one race or they'll race out of order or they'll give them another opportunity. If you can get them to the start on time or as close as possible to it, then offer whatever assistance you can. But once you get into delays or races out of order, give that to the president of the jury and allow them to make a decision because they're the only one who's going to be aware of all of the other issues that might be affecting that crew or that race. And there's only one other to go here, 10-lane race, so it's got to be Queensland. Gee, Karen.
Not me. Who's Dave?
No, that's okay. It doesn't matter. So what we're saying is essentially, if I get this right, is that capsize in a race, there's a rescue and there's another race following on that's likely to be impeded by that rescue. that a fair summary, Karen?
Yeah, we've had a couple of races
Okay,
lately
so-
where we've had rescues
Yep.
that haven't cleared the
So
course fast enough.
in effect, if you can stop a race because there's a rescue, then get it done. If you can't, then you do your level best to get those crews around the rescue and look to see whether or not it affected the race. So my advice on that would be that if a crew's approaching a rescue and they're in the first half of the course and you're not going to be able to steer them around and get it done easily, I'd probably stop the race and do it again. If they're right down in the second half of the course and they're going to be delayed a little by going around, then I'd probably try and finish the race by steering them around safely and have a look at how it affected the race and whether it depends on whether or not it's a final or a heat, etc. But you got to make those judgments on the water. The safest judgment of all is to stop the race, make sure that nothing happens, and then re-row it later on. That's the safest approach to it. If you can get them done and not affect their results because it was lane 9 and the rescue was in lane 9 and lane 8 was empty and you could get them into lane 8 and around it, that might be okay. But, first option is it's a safety issue, stop the race. Second option is, can I get this done without affecting the crew? If there's a ton of doubt on it, don't race them past it, don't race them into it. If it's a very inexperienced crew and it's a windy day and they're not responding to you, stop the race. If it's very close to in front of you before you notice it, then think about what the impact might be if you try and stop the race. They might even run into them after that. But yeah, some of those judgments are very hard to make. But in the end, first priority is safety. And if you can't ensure the safety, then stop them. So we'll go on to start. So we give me a title slide here. And I have got a couple of points that I want to make in this. And I'll reinforce that one there. You call them by their club and then by their lane. And what we say for single sculls is we use their name the first time we call them. So when we call them into the race, we usually use their surname or their family name. And then after that, we call them by their club or their state, if that's appropriate, or their nation, if that's the case. You need to be confident about what you do and you need to be clear about what you do. The less words you use, the better. If you spend too much time trying to explain yourself, you just become less and less clear. You need to make sure that you've got the correct race in front of you and you're aware of any consolidations that are going on. You need as much as possible to start on time. And on time means not too early and not too late. So you don't hang around too long just in case, and you don't start way too early for all sorts of reasons. But the example I give at the Nationals is grandpa and grandma are coming from Queensland to Tasmania to watch granddaughter race in their only race at the Nationals. They get held up at the airport, but they're right. We'll get there. We'll have 20 minutes to spare, and they get there and the race is finished. They're not going to be too happy, and there probably wasn't any genuine need to start the race half an hour early. So if there's a really good reason and the president of the jury makes a decision, then that's fine. But if you decided to do it just so you could get to lunch early, probably not a good call. You need to be aware of any crews that are coming late because there might be a good reason why they came late. So you need to be aware of any of those issues that are happening before they arrive to you, and that's where your marshal and notes and things and president of the jury's information come in, and radio calls and so on. You might be aware that there's an issue in the transit lane that's causing crews to come late because we're about fairness. And one of the issues about starting way too late is that will actually make them late for their next round of races as well. So sometimes boats are in other races and crews are in other races. And as a starter, you might not be aware of that, but if you start starting them 20 minutes or half an hour late, that boat that's coming back to the start will be 20 minutes late or half an hour late getting to the finish to swap over for another crew. So that will make them late coming to the next start as well. So just be really aware of it. And the point I put in there about ensuring the fairness is that if you're going to call handicaps are written on the program in seconds. And the most accurate way to read seconds is to use a stopwatch or a good accurate watch and count the seconds by the stopwatch. Don't make it up in your head. and don't call it and go, oh, that's near enough. You should be doing it as fairly as you possibly can. You don't have to call that every second, but you should call them out off a stopwatch or an accurate watch. So I'll go through a couple of these fairly quickly, but if you've got a fixed start at 2,000 metres, make sure everything's right before the crews get there. Call them in by name and lane. Announce the time to the start. So if they're coming in 5 minutes early, you call all the crews in and say 5 minutes. If they're coming in 3 minutes early, call them all in and say 3 minutes. If they're coming in 12 minutes early, then say 12 minutes, but the next call will be 5 minutes. So that's usually how we do it. We call 12 minutes and then the next call will be 5 minutes. First time you call a crew in, you give them the time. So if they come in at 7 minutes, you'd say, you know, Todd River, lane 3, 7 minutes, just so they're aware of how long they've got. Somebody asked me once before, why do we do that? And the reason is that if you've got 7 minutes, you know you can spend a bit of time warming up in your lane because you have to be attached and ready to go at 2 minutes. Have a look at them and make sure they're coming in safely as they come in as well. So at 2 minutes, we call 2 minutes. Then the aligner gets on with their work. You check, as a starter, you check and make sure that you've got a line. Then you call attention. After attention, you'd press a button or show a signal, and then you'd go pretty close to the time. You look for false starts and you watch crews to 100 metres. 100 metres is just a nice safe distance to say that crews have got out of the start, the umpire is observing them, and it's been a nice fair start. So 100 metres is what's called the start zone. And you see there the salubrious start tower for the Olympics, but it had everything required of it and did its job beautifully. Spot the problem, a single scull race, and the umpire who was coming up to the starts managed to leave a wash all over the start. And this is after a delay in the roll call. So you wouldn't want to be that umpire. You wouldn't want to be that sculler either. So starting from the side, I've titled it as we'd call it here. So we might call it a river start or starting from the bank or something like that. But essentially it's the same idea with a slightly different process. So we're just going to make sure that everything's there. When we get there, we do the announcing the same way. We get down to 2 minutes. We have a bit of a look around at uniforms and so on, if we've got the time. And we encouraged in New South Wales, this will be a change for some people in New South Wales, we encouraged in New South Wales to use the term quick start, because at national and international regattas, if there's a quick start, the term quick start is used. But now the term for quick start is all crews, attention and go. So if we're going to be consistent, oddly enough, we used to do this in New South Wales before, we now announce all crews before we say the word attention, simply to let them know that the start's about to go. Then we call attention, and then we use the go, either with a tone or the word go or a flag from behind or whatever your state's doing. In New South Wales, when we do starts from the side, the starter is the aligner. The starter aligns them, gets them on the line, calls all crews, attention and go. And again, we try and look for that 100 metres to make sure that it was a fair start and things got underway. The umpire might even stop the race at that point too. Again, a flag start. This is starting from behind. We've used this occasionally in New South Wales for para races and some of the shorter races. And somebody's thinking, what are we doing? Paras are 2,000, but we have school para races where they start at 1,000 metres, and we have what we call recreational para races where they start at 500 metres, just to be fair to those rowers. So again, same thing, 2 minutes, make sure they're aligned. A roll call for a flag start, or we might use a quick start, which will be all crews. Attention, we put a red flag in the air, we drop the flag to the side and say the word go at the same time. We look for false starts and we watch the race for 100 metres. That start, just to prove that it can happen to anybody, that flag start is actually in Rio at the World Juniors. So with no notice whatsoever, we were given 500 metre races and the umpire was asked to start the race with a flag. So that's how that came about. So just proves as an umpire, sometimes you have to be flexible and you have to make sure you understand the process, because you might be given a job that you've never done before at very short notice. False starts can only be judged by the aligner. So if you're the side start, you're the aligner. If it's a start from behind or a fixed start, that will be the aligner's job. So If there's a false start, the race is stopped. That can be stopped by the umpire or the starter. The starter will do it with a button and lights. The umpire will do it with a flag. So the way to stop an entire race is to put a red flag in the air, wave it from side to side, and if a bell is used, ring the bell. And then what I like is they say that you then announce stop rowing as well. So that means you've got 3 hands, one for the flag, one for the bell, and one for stop rowing. But a flag and a bell is often enough. If you're the starter, there's either a procedure with a flag, a megaphone, or lights. At circ, it's lights and a horn, and those lights flash and the horn beeps on and off, and that will be the indication to the crews. If a false start is called and a yellow card's awarded, and the way that's announced is Alice Springs, false start, yellow card. So you call the crew, let them know what the issue was, and then tell them what the sanction is. If there's an indicator for the pontoon, that's put out. If you issue a yellow card, you need to think about whether or not a yellow card was issued previously, and this is where notes on programs and things come in. If that crew's already got 1 yellow card, that'll be a red card and they'll be excluded and they need to be off the course. If a race false starts, you have to make sure you let the president of the jury or the judges and the timekeepers know, because 2 things are going to happen. If you're using a computer system, it will automatically tick over to the next race and you're going to start the same race. You may start that race in a slightly different order, and that will be the president of the jury's decision. But whatever happens, the timing system has to be reset for that race, and the judges have to be aware of what race is coming down in what order. So make sure you give them time to get that done, and make sure you're given the go-ahead to start that race. And I put right at the top, think about how to get them back to the start. If they're 90 metres out when you stop the race, they can back down. If they row out to 250 metres, you're probably not going to get them to back down because it'll take too long. You may ask them to turn around in their lane and come back, or if you're going to run them out of order, you might ask them to go to the opposite side of the transit lane if that's safe, and make their way back to the start and wait for advice. So, if they're 500 metres down the course and you stop the race like we talked about with that safety issue, you'd take them off the side of the course. You let the president of the jury know you'd stop the race, and you'd get them to wait up at the start for advice. That's not a false start, by the way, but that was just put in there. Now, when you restart a race from a false start, it's the same start. So if you used a roll call and you restart the race, you should be using a roll call. So again, you might need to think ahead about quick starts. If the weather's starting to deteriorate and you've got 10 heats in front of you, you might go, well, let's do a quick start now, because if you used a roll call, and the issue was the time it took for the roll call that caused the false start, when they come back, you should be using the same start. So to make it easier for yourself, try and use the safest, most efficient method the first time. So as a starter, what do you do? If someone puts their hand up during the roll call, the answer is not much. But you need to be aware of why the hand's up. If the hand's up just slightly pointing just a little bit to one side, then you're going to keep going. But if they're pointing at 45 degrees or something just snapped on the boat or the boat holder fell in the water, then there's no point ignoring it. You can stop at that point. If there's wash on the course, you can wait, or you can stop your roll call and wait. That's one of those times where you might just say to crews, look, we're not going to go ahead, because you're going to get to the end of the roll call and it won't work. If there's a breakage, you need to there's no breakage rule for, as far as I'm aware, in any state. We haven't mentioned Masters. If there's a breakage in that start zone and you know it's going to have a major impact on the race, then I would consider stopping the race at that point. If there's a breakage actually in the roll call, and I've seen that, where somebody just moves on their seat, bang, and it breaks, you might want to give them a bit extra time just to consider whether it's simple enough to fix. So I'll put there, will it affect the race? If a crew jumps a start, it's either a false start or not. If it's a false start, you know how to deal with it. If it's not a false start, you don't have to do anything. And if you're the starter, it's not your decision whether or not it's a false start, it's the aligner's. So if you see something, you think it's a false start, let the aligner do their job. If the aligner doesn't see it and you're aware of it and you think it was a grossly unfair start, then stop the race and pull them back, but you can't call it a false start. You can just say you stopped the race, you didn't think it was fair, and we're going to restart it. If there's no umpire, you're probably the first person in history ever to start a race with it. No, you're not. If the race goes away without an umpire, you have to make a decision very quickly if that race is going to be safe and if it's going to be fair. So if it's an under 17 quad race, it's probably going to be okay. I'll make up a race, but if it was an under 12 pairs race, then it probably wouldn't be, and I'd stop it. So you need to just look at the race and say, well, yeah, they'll be right. The umpire's only 200 metres down the course, and you let them know. But it's your call, and you need to do it very, very quickly. If there's a loss of line during the roll call, as I said before, just change the pace of your roll call, slow it down a little bit, try and get to the end of the roll call and see if you get a line. If you get to the end of the roll call and you still don't have a line, then just say to the crews, as you were, there's been a problem. We'll wait till you're aligned and we'll get the race underway. And at that point, you'd start with the roll call. That's just one of my favourite photos. So this can happen to you. This is coastal rowing on Hong Kong Harbour, Para Crew, high-speed ferry. If you have a look, it's probably less than 50 metres between a high-speed ferry doing about 30 knots and a Para double crew on open water in Victor Harbour. So you might think that was scary. I did. The only thing that's not in that slide is that the ferry actually had a siren going at the time to let us know that we were in his way and he was going to come through anyway. So luckily for us, we had a maritime boat right beside us and he was aware of the entire situation. So it was good that he was there to judge it for us. So believe it or not, we're smack on time. No, we're not. And we've got to the Q&A part of it. And our numbers dropped off a little because a couple of people had to drop. Just really, really quickly with this, just to tell you what these slides are. Bottom one is just a picture slide. The top one is the Canadian Women's 8 who came first in the Women's 8 at the Olympics. And if you have a look at the coxswain, she has in her hand a mobile phone, which was withdrawn from her zooty down about waist level after the finish of the race. And there was much discussion by commentators and everybody else that she couldn't have a mobile phone. So I can tell you the decision of the president of the jury was there was absolutely no evidence that the phone was used during the race. So it wasn't illegal. And everybody in the crew could have a mobile phone and use it after the race or before the race. So there was no issue. But there was an objection made about that and it was dealt with by the jury. The one on the right-hand side is actually showing you that the rule at the international level is that the hat and the zooty, the hat and the visor have to be the same. In this case, they're not, so it's against the rules. But we'd been told by the president of the jury that we didn't have to apply that rule, so that was fine. So there were no issues. So that's the end of my presentation, and I am over time. I misread my watch, believe it or not. Are there any other questions, Olivia, or has anybody got one that they wish to ask?
We've just had one about development of digital draws and whether they'll be developed for umpires to use on water to make notes about collisions, etc.
Yep, I'm guessing that came from a Victorian, and that's not a derogatory thing at all. But yes, we are actually, and certainly Victoria are more advanced than any other state in this. But at the moment, there is a development of the ability to use, at the moment, we can all use digital draws. So if you use the mobile part of Rowing Manager in the app, you can look at draws and results at any time during a regatta. And if the crew is scratched, that's indicated there in front of you live. So the scratching's done, it's entered, it's uploaded, it's done. And we're certainly looking at, and it's there now, but it's not being used for various reasons. One of them is that some states are in lockdown and don't have regattas anyway. But we're certainly looking at the ability to put notes in, and I sort of made a mention to that earlier. So if you're a marshal and there's an issue with a marshal, there's a way to do that electronically on an iPad or a tablet, where the starter will be aware of that the second that you've done it. But at the moment, I don't have any screens to demonstrate it. As soon as we've done that, I'll try and do with people who are using it and the person developing it, Stephen, we'll try and put together a little module to demonstrate that. But certainly, I know New South Wales are looking at tablets, Victoria using tablets, and some other states are discussing them. So And that's well and truly developed and able to be used almost immediately, where you have to log in, you have to authenticate. So we can't just have anybody around the course doing it. You have to be a user and you have to authenticate, and you can add notes to the program, and that includes notes on rescues and incidents and so on. So once that's well in your state, you'll be made aware of it. If it's available more broadly, then we'll try and put a little training package together. The only other thing I want to go on, sorry, go ahead.
Greg Barney from South Australia.
Yep, Barney.
Is there still a measurement on your foot stretcher for how far the shoe can move?
No. So the real short version of that is no. The rule now says, so the Australian rule, and depending on how your state has done it, the rule says that the shoe should come to no further past the horizontal. So the way I describe that is parallel to the horizontal components of the boat. So the shoe shouldn't lift up more than the washboard on the boat or horizontal if the boat's on the water. Is that clear enough, Tony?
Yep,
yeah. So
thanks,
there's no actual measurement, but remember that some shoes are designed to be easily removed from the boat. So things like the push bike clips, if the bicycle clips, if you rotate the shoe, it will come out of the clip straight away.
Yeah,
so in that case, there is no limit on the movement because the shoe will come away with the boat and the foot. So you need to be aware that some of those, and there's some others that appear to be shoes that come away from the boat, but they remain in the boat. And in that case, the lift is limited, the shoe has to be restrained, and there has to be a single movement to remove your foot from the shoe.
So those new boats would have the new connections.
The Shimano type clips, no, honestly, Barney, you don't see many of them. Even internationally, you don't see a lot of them. But there's a couple of brands where the shoe will unclip from the boat and come away with the foot.
Yeah.
And there's a couple that look a bit like that, where they're in a cradle or there's a metal bracket, but that shoe stays in the boat. And if the shoe stays in the boat, then it has to be restrained and it can't come past the horizontal.
Terrific. Thanks, mate. Appreciate it.
The only exception to that is clogs, obviously.
Yeah.
Because if you've got clogs, you don't have to worry about it because your foot comes out simply.
Yeah. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Any others? No, the only other point I wanted to make was currently we're looking at an online course for level 1 and 2, and that'll be delivered through Rowing Australia, and that's really just in development at the moment. But that'll be given to all state development officers to look at in development, and then once it's live, everybody will have access to it, and it will have assessment components and so on. But we'll be talking to all the states to make sure it fits with everything they want. And as I said to the CEOs last week, we're not telling people they have to use it. So if states have a system they wish to use because they control level 1 and 2, they're welcome to use it. If they want to use the online one because it suits them and they believe it does what they want, then they're welcome to use that too. Individuals are welcome to use it for preparation for assessments and so on. All right, I'm done. If you have any questions, feel free to send them to Olivia or me. What we'll do is I will prepare a little summary of any questions that were asked and the answers to them. And you'll get a copy of the recording once we tidy up the bits that don't need to be there, and access to the presentation as well, so that you can go through it in your own time. And if you've got any other questions, feel free to either email or phone them to me, because I'll happily go through them with you. And can I say thank you very much for the people who showed an interest and took part. We sat pretty well on 60 for most of that. So I would say that would be the biggest group of officials that we've had at a seminar anywhere. So well done to every single one of you. Thank you.
Thanks, Greg. Appreciate it.
No worries. Olivia?
Yeah, we have no other questions. So
okay. Well, I'm happy, Olivia, if you want to end it there.
Yeah.
Hope everybody stays safe and well,
Thank
enjoys whatever restrictions they've got on them at the moment. And thank you very much.
Thanks, Greg.